What's going on, everybody? It's Blandon here from Mortgage HQ, and in this video I share a client interview with you, Scott, who's a friend and client now, and he takes an unconventional way to sort of build equity in properties, and he sort of shares his journey in the last 5 years and how he has sort of built up that capital, and now he can make a lot more different investment decisions. So hopefully you guys find this helpful and see if there are some insights that you can take away in your investing journey. Welcome, everybody, to another episode of Leverage Addicts. Scott Crowe, proud father, investor, construction manager at Titus Group, which is a property development company. You guys might have seen the ads popping up on Facebook. And yeah, Scott here, he's client and friend now. So I thought it'll be a really cool episode today just to try and understand his investment philosophy, because you've done several live-in flips now where you bought those properties, well undervalued, and then lived in it for a while. And then what you decided to do is like, okay, I'm going to sell it and then go up, and made some healthy profits. Some interesting decision making there, and I thought that'll be really cool if we can jump into those a little bit. And you pretty much made your first million of capital that way, just upgrade. And now I think you're sort of like fully engaged with development. So welcome.
Hey, thanks, Blandon. Yeah, thanks for having me. I'm looking forward to it.
No, so just trying to remember back, like when I first heard about you in the office. So basically the guys were just saying like, oh bro, we got this like really buff dude, and his name's Scott, and he just bought this this dual income property. It's a mean deal, like that. Those are the conversations we have at the office.
Yeah.
So I don't even remember what year that was now. Like, how long ago was that?
I feel like it was I feel like I signed up to buy it in 2017, and then it settled early 2018, I think. So what's that? Just over 4 years ago.
So back then you were already like, well, you were a lot more into fitness back then, and then you were quite into properties. Like, how did you get into the two things,
Yeah, well, I was definitely a lot more into fitness when I wasn't a dad. Had a lot more free time. But yeah, I would say I guess my interest in property was probably twofold. One, because I was did a construction management degree, and I guess got into the construction industry more, but I pretty quickly found that I actually really probably was more interested in property. I mean, my skill set was around the construction side of things, but like, I guess the natural progression of my career went sort of from, really like construction focused. Now I'm trying to get development focused. So I think that was, I got exposed to large scale developments through my like involvement in commercial construction.
Yeah.
And then also like growing up, my dad's, he's always invested in property. That's pretty much how he's built his wealth. He's got, multiple rental properties and stuff. And he was always looking at property and interested in property my whole life. So that's probably what got me initially kind of interested in it. I think, some, lots of friends that I've had, like, Andrew and stuff. Obviously his business has sort of grown down the property sector. And, I think it's just a general Kiwi thing that people are kind of interested in property, really.
And actually, because, the twang that you have is obviously not local. Tell us a little bit about that. Like what was the transition sort of?
Yeah. So my mom is American and I was born in the States, but my dad's a Kiwi, and my dad lived in the States for about 15 years. So that through that period, he married my mom, had 5 kids. Yeah. So I moved to New Zealand when I was just about to turn 13. So I started high school in New Zealand, essentially.
How did you keep, like, I'm just still perplexed. Like, you've been here so long, but you kept your accent.
Yeah, I don't know. I think I don't know if this is a fact, but I think there's something around about the fact if you live somewhere till you're 12, you generally keep the accent. I could be wrong, but I think I have heard that. But some of my younger siblings definitely have less of an accent. Yeah. And I also think an American accent's probably just a hard one to shake.
Yeah. Do you feel like the American culture have any influence in your like competitiveness or some of the motivations that you have, like later on in your years?
No, I don't think probably. I don't think American culture, probably just more like I think probably the culture that I've grown up in has influenced me more, but I wouldn't say really the country, if that makes sense. Probably more family and yeah.
Yeah.
But it definitely is. There's probably definitely more pressure on people from a young age in America because there's a lot of competitiveness with getting into college, and so like from a young age, they probably feel the pressure of like decision making sooner, I think. Whereas in New Zealand, it's kind of like you get to 18 and then you kind of decide what you want to do. Whereas in America, I think yeah. So yeah, that's probably a little bit of influence there, but I would say it's more around just like my upbringing, really.
So what was the goal when you first started in properties? Like, so it sounded like you were doing this fitness thing and you were competing at one point.
Yeah.
And so what was the first deal and how did you get into it? Like, what was like, yeah, I need to do this deal. What was the switch?
Yeah, I think for me, like the competing was just a hobby, really. Like, even though I did it quite seriously, I never really saw it ever being a career. And then, I guess as I came up through the construction career, you eventually sort of end up with like, a salary, I suppose, that you can service some reasonable debt. So I think it's probably just a natural progression to like thinking, okay, well, I guess I better start looking into property. It's probably a good idea, especially like I said, that like, my dad's grown old as well through that. So it's probably where my initial investment thoughts went. And then that particular deal, I think I was actually thinking about this yesterday. I think what sold me on that deal was probably two things, especially you got to remember, like when I was making these decisions, I didn't know what I know now. But I think the reasons I made them are still like, probably still fundamental to the whole kind of reason for purchasing. But I was a single guy back then, and then I saw the dual key, obviously had the opportunity. So for those people who don't know, dual key's essentially one apartment, but it's got two front doors, so you're buying one property, but you essentially have two one-bedroom apartments. So I just saw the opportunity to live in one, obviously get an owner-occupied type loan, which has got its own benefits, and then rent the other one, which, obviously cash flows, I think, at that point in time, a lot of the debt. So I think when you're buying your first property, you're probably quite daunted by the fact that you're sort of signing up to this 30-year debt. And I think I sort of thought, the potential to get that income and not actually have someone living with you had some real benefits. And then just looking at it on a pure yield basis, I guess I went the next step further to think eventually, you can't live in a one-bedroom apartment your whole life. I'm going to have to sell this eventually. Just looking at the yield that you could generate versus all other standard property types kind of made it like, for an investor, this is always going to be a good deal, even at a significantly higher price than I paid. I think it was still netting like 5% back then. So, I kind of knew that it'd eventually be worth more. And then, it was down in the CBD on Albert Street. So, it was just a good location, and it was a Conrad property development. So they've obviously got a good reputation. And
do they?
I mean, well, they're established and they're substantial, I guess. Yeah. Good reputation in terms of actually delivering what they're marketing, I think.
The turning point there though, like you bought this jewel key, you had it for a little while, you told your broker you're holding it. And then suddenly there was a decision to actually, okay, you know what, I'm going to sell it. That's an interesting decision. Like, how did you come? Like a lot of people buy their first property, they're like, oh yeah, now I've done it. I've bought my property. I'm gonna try pay down my mortgage, and then that's what they do. They enjoy life.
Yeah.
But you decide to migrate again.
Yeah. I think what the one thing I was going to finish saying is that when I went to buy it, the agent, I suppose good agents sort of read the purchaser as well. And I guess this guy knew that I was probably just more of a like analytical type person. And when I sat down to actually sign up for it, I was thinking about a couple of apartments, one he had listed and obviously one that he didn't. So he was probably trying to sway me in this direction. And he was showing me a lot of the other properties that Conrad was doing at the time, like sort of developments that were not quite as far progressed. And obviously those were being marketed like on a much higher square meter rate. And they were probably in inferior locations. So for me, I was thinking, like that to me made a lot of sense. Like the square meter rate's quite it's quite an analytical figure. You can look at it and be like, it's a better location. It's quite a bit less, like there's probably going to be equity there.
Right.
So, I mean, I think everyone wants to, when they're, feel like they're making a smart decision and when they're buying, and that for me was like, oh yeah, that made a lot of sense. So anyway, that was part of the reason why I sort of chose that property in the end. Because I think when you're looking to buy an apartment, the square meter rate is quite actually like an influential factor on what you might be willing to spend or not spend, et cetera, et cetera. Yeah.
Yeah,
So the
and
reason,
I think that is such an important thing for first home buyers as well. Like sometimes they're just so unsure about, oh, am I making the right decision around my price? But the square meter rate is such a good reference to go off, how much you're buying per square meter on the land or the floor area of the house. So it's really good that you sort of pick that up on your first property, because a lot of people don't. They don't think about this kind of stuff.
Yeah, it is. And, even today when looking at, it's a real quick, like you said, it's a real easy way to run a quick trick. You look at a property down the road, you go, oh, look, yeah, the house might not be quite as good, but it's sold for $3,000 a square meter more. This is probably a good deal. It's a real, anyone can run those numbers and go, oh yeah, give you a bit of a gut feel. You obviously got to do research, but yeah. But yeah, the reason for sale was really, I suppose, because my life had changed quite a bit, even just in the time that I sort of went to contract to when I settled it. I met my now wife, Georgina, and she was working from home at the time. And it wasn't really the sort of apartment that like you would want to have two people living in, one person working full time. Like it was really more of a like a lock and leave type bachelor pad. So, I think we looked at that and thought, this isn't really going to be ideal. And then also I think there was like 250 apartments in that building, and a lot of them became Airbnb almost instantly. So I think just the general vibe of the place, it just didn't have a great feeling to it. And I sort of thought, like everything was shiny and new and it wasn't fully appropriate. Like it might actually be quite a good time to sell it, because I was thinking, what's this building going to feel and look like in a couple of years after kind of having that, transient people coming in and out of it all the time. And I just probably saw that as a little bit of a risk. So, whilst everything was new, you still got your 12-month defect warranty and everything. I thought, given I'm not going to be here for that long, now might be a good time to sell it. And, there's a couple other sales of some apartments at the time, and that sort of reinforced that decision. So I would say that I definitely didn't buy it thinking that I was going to sell it straight, relatively quickly. But the reasons that I thought it was a good buy transpired to help that sale become a good result. So but
you pretty much doubled your your deposit, your equity, at that point when you sold.
That, I think. Yeah.
So what was the money in and what was the money out and how long was the time period?
How long was the time period? So I think I basically put everything I had in at the time, including my KiwiSaver. That was like 100. I think it was roughly 170. And I'm pretty sure. Let me just work out.
That's a super KiwiSaver.
No, that wasn't all. I think 40 of it was KiwiSaver. The purchase price versus the sale price was basically double the deposit, essentially.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's really good. And then what was the next thing? Now, what was the new focus? Obviously, Georgina's kind of in your decision-making process now. You're not thinking as a single guy anymore.
Yeah. So I think we needed somewhere bigger, like probably was essentially going 2-bedroom minimum. I'd say it was probably the thought process at that time. I did buy another apartment. I think that was probably because I knew I'd been spending so much time thinking about apartments. So I kind of knew the market well. So it seemed like more comfortable buying back into that market. Because I'd, obviously done a lot of research and at that point in time was working like in Newmarket. So I wanted to say central and definitely couldn't afford a house in that area then. So I bought another apartment in Grey Lynn, and that one just was like a northeast corner apartment. The building was about 10 years old, so like it wasn't didn't have like that brand new feel, but it definitely wasn't old. And just offered real good value for money. Like I think it was like under 10 grand a square meter, and it was a northeast corner apartment with a huge balcony and had 2 car parks. So I just think that probably the main thing there was the location, and I just thought it was a good value proposition.
Yeah. I don't remember that deal too much. I have vague memory about that one. Like, so what happened to that one? Like you bought it, you thought it was a good price, and then like what was the decision to move on from that one?
Yeah. So we bought it, and I guess at that point in time, like we were still in a point in our relationship where we probably weren't thinking about having children, and like even know probably that we would end up together. Like probably had a good feel that we would, but you don't know those things. It was still quite early on. So say when I bought that one, I just thought it was it offered good value and it was a place to live. And we actually ended up, just because it had been, I think a professional rugby player actually had owned it. So it had been rented for 10 years. So whilst we were living there, we gave it like a good refresh. But that was mainly just because we were like into design and, want to live in a place that we're really proud of. And yeah, we were living there. And then I think it'd be a year and a half. And I guess we were thinking more about having a family and whatnot. And that's when that townhouse opportunity came up. And probably the main reason we sold that was just because we knew that, we knew that we wanted to buy that. I think sort of around about the same time that we sold and bought that. Yeah.
Yeah, because those are your two most recent deals, which is like, I mean, you also had it was pretty much COVID, and you bought that. Who are the developers for that other one that you bought?
Gibbons and Co. That was their first one they sort of did in like the tier A Auckland suburbs. Yeah.
Yeah, I remember when you showed me that developer, I started like geeking out. Like I downloaded all the most of the resource consent, started doing numbers on the developments. I'm like, man, these guys are like, killing it.
Yeah. They at that point, if it was a little while there, they had a pretty impressive run. Sure. Yeah.
Yeah, smooth operators.
Bringing projects to the market.
Yeah, they bring good stuff to the market, so I think it's important.
Definitely, yeah, definitely.
So then, okay, and then you've got that one over in what was the? Obviously, I think again is probably you find that you bought. Is it a 2-bedroom or 3-bedroom, that one that you bought?
That one was about 100 square meters. Yeah.
Oh, so it's a 3-bedroom. So you bought the 3-bedroom, and then you sold. Like you lived in it for maybe a year, and then you sold it again. And by that point, like the profit on that one was pretty good because you sold in like one of the highest market.
Yeah, that was by far the obviously the best of the deals that or purchases that we've made.
So the price in was 1.1, and then you sold it within how long, and how much did you sell it for again?
It was $1 million, and we sold it for like 1.6, low 1.6s. Yeah.
After like a year of settlement, right?
Something like that. Yeah.
Yeah. But I'm really impressed with the next deal, which is the one that you're living in right now, because you made a tidy profit, even though we're in like the worst market. So what was the decision-making process with this one? Because you completely switched from like new builds, which was like your strength was like apartments, and then townhouse is still kind of similar, but then like you went straight into houses. What was the learning along the way that made you change that decision?
Probably two things. One was that I guess we were living in the townhouse and we had one coming on 2 kids, so you kind of know, okay, once again, you kind of need probably somewhere a little bit more substantial. And after living for a year in St. Heliers, I was like, man, I never want to leave this place. Like, the bays is pretty nice. So if you're looking for a house in that location, it's like, obviously it comes with a reasonable price tag. So I guess I was just kind of looking for a way to make that all feasible, end up with a house in this location. And I was looking basically from like, Tekapuna all the way down through like Point Chev, all of the bays. So sort of looking at all that eastern oceanside suburbs, and I think we felt most comfortable around here. So it's probably part of the reason why we ended up buying here. But I also just thought, like this location, because prices were quite inflated then, obviously. At least, they were going through a real inflationary stage. So I was a little bit worried about buying anything at that point in time, because I sort of thought like things could actually wind back quite quickly. So I thought if I was going to spend a reasonable amount of money, if you're buying in these, in these sorts of locations, I think they're just going to be a little bit more resilient. Like I looked at some areas like, say Hobsonville, and I was thinking, man, if like the market really winds back, it's so far from town, and it's sort of a newer area. Like if you're buying in these more established areas close to the CBD, it's just going to have a little bit more resilience if things do go backwards. So that almost maybe in some ways pushes you to spend a little bit more, because it's almost, I felt like it was slightly safer. But yeah, the reason we bought it was because we're trying to really end up with a house in this sort of location. And the plan that we had was to basically purchase the land and the house, we were going to subdivide it and build a house on the front. And
I just want to say, so you bought it for, I think it was 2.8, right?
Yeah.
Around that. And then you like, it's sold for 3.5.
low 3.6s.
Or low 3.6, and you probably spent like 150K on the renovations.
No, it would have cost more than that because it was such a big house. The house is 290 square meters. So yeah, it ended up being definitely more than what I thought. But
What,
yeah, just such a
in
big
the vicinity of 200-ish?
I don't know. I don't run the zeros, and we did pretty much everything.
Yeah, it just cut out there. Like I missed what you
Oh,
just
sorry.
said.
I was just gonna say, yeah, I think it would. To be honest with you, I think it would be even more than a couple of hundred. But like I said, it's quite a substantial house, and we pretty much refreshed everything.
Yeah.
So yeah. Look, it was a significant investment into the house. I think maybe if it's quite funny because if I did it again, maybe I wouldn't have done as much as we did to the house. But then also, had we not have, and the market did what it did, we probably wouldn't have had that same result. So property is funny. Yeah, you can always look back and say I might have done this or that, but there's so many factors you can't control that it's hard to.
Yeah, because I think even though we throw the numbers out like that, like people are like, oh wow, that's crazy, and I think it's quite skillful in terms of what you did because you bought at the highest and you sold in the worst market, but you still made like a really good profit. So the deal itself would have been really strong to begin with. Mm-hmm. But I think what's missed often is like the level of work that you have put in, like the time you spent on negotiation, the research that you did, the like you're just trying to make sure that when you buy the property, you have access to the back services as well. Like that was interesting. So if you guys don't know, because some of you guys might have heard about this deal before, I talked about it one time on a Saturday. Scott, when he bought this deal, like there wasn't access to stormwater.
Sewer.
Oh, sorry, the wastewater sewer.
There wasn't access. Well, there wasn't easy access to private sewer, which is generally what you need to subdivide.
Yeah. And so how did you do that? Like you had to talk to two owners.
Yeah, well, actually, it's real funny. I had an opportunity to buy a house down the back, just like as an off-market thing, and that one did have access to services. Did it? I'm trying to think. Yeah, that's right. It had access to services, but the driveway was actually too narrow that it would have been preventative to subdivision. So I actually asked the agent to say, hey, can you talk to the neighbor and see if we can like buy a bit of their driveway or something so we can get a wider driveway? Because this property was definitely under market price because of this really narrow driveway. Anyway, that didn't work out. I couldn't get a hold of the other owner, but through that whole process, he actually met the people at the front, which is the house that we did buy. And funnily enough, on the title, and I've actually put an offer on another property that had the same sort of, I shouldn't even say this because now people are going to know my trick now. But it had
we'll cut it out, okay? We'll cut it out.
Yeah, no. It had an easement for sewer through another property, which that easement connected your property to the public sewer. So if you've got an easement, you can upgrade the pipe, you can utilize the pipe. So it really gives you like a connection point through to the public services, which is what you need for subdivision. So this property had an easement through the neighbor into the public sewer. There was still a lot of challenges around making that all work, just in terms of getting if we build a new house on the front, how we're actually going to get sewer down to the back to utilize this easement. But yeah, it basically gave us the opportunity to do that subdivision.
Yeah. So it's more like a legal play than negotiating with your neighbor.
That one was, yeah, it was, yeah. But in saying that, like, that's definitely like a legitimate route for trying to like, make deals work. I think you've got a property land in that you had a deal with the neighbor where they'd let you do some stormwater connections.
Oh yeah, we dropped gift basket and stuff. We put on our best behavior. Went to see the grandma at the back. We listened to what her needs are. She's like, oh, I don't like that tree. If you guys are doing this, could you chop down that tree? We did. We just did what she needed and try to not disturb her life. Just try to hear her out, and that's how we got it.
Yeah. And there'll be, particularly in the last couple of years with the market being like it has been and people getting into development, there've been a lot of neighbor negotiations going around. So like it's definitely part of property development in Auckland anyway, because the services are quite hard. I would say most developers that are doing multiple deals will be dealing with neighbors on a regular basis. You try and obviously find properties that you don't need to, but it's quite challenging. Yeah.
So we've been talking about deals like this whole last 20 minutes, but I thought one thing that we didn't ask is you're a family man now, And
Mhm.
moving a few times is not easy, especially if you're a couple, you've got kids. What did your wife think of all of this? Like,
Well, I think like she's quite supportive, and we've got like similar goals in terms of where we want our family to end up, and I guess we're just trying to do the best that we can for our family. So it's definitely disruptive and challenging. But I do think there's a part of us that does enjoy it as well, so that probably definitely helps. Like, I think if she didn't enjoy sort of the stuff that I enjoy, then I would really be struggling. But I think ultimately we're like kind of both pulling in the same direction. And then we've got a good support system. Like, obviously when we move, we've always got family to help us, which is massively helpful. I think what I would never do again is, like, if we were to live in a big house like this, we were living in it the whole time we were renovating it, and my wife had the little kids. That was quite hard. I think if we were going to buy like a house that needed a renovation, we would just rent something, even though it's expensive, and just let the tradies go through and do their thing. But yeah, look, she's really understanding and just supportive. So I was definitely lucky to have her on board for that. But it is challenging, and it does take a lot of energy. Yeah.
And the result is, like, to be honest, like the position that you put yourself in is, it's like a small percentage of the population where, you're at the start of your family journey, and basically you have the choice to maybe live somewhere maybe that is slightly less prestige than where you are right now, and you're pretty much mortgage free, so
I wouldn't say that, not right now, but yeah.
well, close to, right?
It's a sort of a reality though. Like, if you live in a place like Auckland and you sort of you've got certain goals, you can't just save away your salary. You sort of have to do, there's certain things you want to achieve, you kind of got to work for them. Unfortunately, it's quite an expensive place to live, and you just got to do what you can to get ahead, really. Yeah. I suppose, I was lucky being exposed to construction and property and stuff, and with the upbringing I've had, sort of could see how there was opportunity there. I think if you didn't have any of that exposure, it would definitely be harder to do what I've done. But then there's people like Andrew, he's getting more into property, but he's essentially built most of his wealth through focusing on growing businesses, and I don't know much about that. So I think the main thing is, you just use your skill sets and work hard and try your best, really. Yeah. And I guess for me, that my skill set was sort of down the route that I have gone, really. Yeah.
Yeah. We haven't really grown much wealth yet. We still work for our employees at the moment.
Yeah. No, I don't know about that. Anyway. Yeah.
No, but that's cool. So, okay. So then the next big chapter for you was sort of moving from the commercial property space into residential development. And Titus, like, I think all first home buyers would have seen their ads. And yeah, like that actually, like, I was genuinely quite excited for you when you like told me, oh, I'm actually moving on to this company, and you're getting into this space, because I'm excited because I want to learn more from you. I'm like, now that you're in this space, there's so much more I want to extract from your brain.
Yeah. There's definitely, I'm still learning every day. Look, it was a little bit of a, I wouldn't say a big decision, but it was definitely a decision that I thought pretty hard about, because kind of working for like larger property groups and then commercial construction and stuff, working on sort of multi-million-dollar projects, then to going and sort of more focusing on residential townhouses, it is a little bit of a shift. But I mean, ultimately the reason I pursued the opportunity is because I've got that real interest in, I guess, residential property development. So it was a real immediate exposure to that. And then also, the guys at Titus are awesome to work for, and, I really enjoy working there. And, it's been good for sure. And like I said, like I had researched a real significant amount about property development, because I was looking at sort of some of these subdivision type deals and stuff. And that really helps me in my job every day, but still, actually physically going through the process like 6-7 times a year of doing, 20 lot subdivisions and construction, still learning lots. And there's a lot of challenges and hoops. So kind of going through those repeatedly, you're always learning something new. Yeah. Doing due diligence on properties, etc. Yeah, it's real interesting.
So right now, because obviously the market slowed down quite a bit, what are your thoughts in terms of where we're heading, and how has perhaps change your decision making in terms of investment?
Yeah. Okay. My thoughts on the market. Yeah, look, I'm definitely not an expert on economics. But, and I guess the one, albeit slightly a negative thing that's happening, the one positive is that it seems like the Reserve Bank's kind of just doing what they said they're going to do. So you kind of know what's going to happen, which if you take a lot of that unknowns out of property, it gets a little bit less scary. So I think if I was looking to invest in property, I'd sort of take the view that, rates are probably going to go up a little bit more, might be a year, might be 2 years. But the likelihood is that they'll go down again, and then the demand will come back up. And if you're buying now, it's quite easy, I think, to get a property 20% under CV at the moment, maybe even more. If you're really working the market hard and doing your research, I think you can buy quite well. And as long as you can afford to hold it at that slightly higher interest, there's probably some opportunity on the other side. Particularly, like I'm saying, if you're like an early stage investor, if you've got the opportunity to live in the property, sort of doubling down your expenses with an investment in a place to live, I think there's still opportunities out there. Yeah. And, I'm actually a little bit, I feel like the market was sort of going down after November last year every day, basically for, I don't know, at least 6 months, kind of into June, July. But I've sort of been a little bit surprised. It seems quite resilient to me now. It doesn't really feel like it's, and like I said, I'm definitely not an expert, but kind of feels pretty steady where it's at, and I think people are kind of getting used to these new rates, and sort of it is what it is. People are still going to buy property. There's never a time that everyone stops buying or selling. It's just kind of part of the whole cycle.
Yeah, because you get quite involved in the development process. Like, what are you guys seeing in terms of doing deals on behalf of the company? Like from that perspective, are you guys doing more deals? Are you guys jumping up and down on acquisition? Are you finding, or is it easier to do deals or harder to do deals at the moment?
Well, sort of, it's easier. Well, I wouldn't say easier. It's always hard to buy land, but you're definitely able to buy land for better, buy land better. But then obviously you're going to have to expect that you're going to sell them slightly less than what they were selling in November last year, but that's just because that's the market. So I think they sort of balance each other out. We definitely having to put more time into sales and marketing, but like the fundamentals of the deals we're looking at, they all still have to be solid. Like the property's got to work in terms of services, and it's got to be a good location that people are going to be interested in. If anything, I would say, we're probably looking at land where we might be able to offer the homes at a little bit more of an affordable price, because obviously everyone's had a little bit of a crunch on their lending. So, it's a bit like maybe the old 850 is the new 750 kind of thing, just because of the test rates. So I'd say we're still active, still looking to buy land. The main change might be that we're a little bit open to kind of opportunities where we can sell the units at a little bit more of an affordable price. I mean, I think all of our stuff is generally affordable, but maybe focusing a little bit more on that even more affordable end. We just had a 30-unit project that I think there's maybe two left, and that's sold down from sort of about March this year. So I'm really in the sort of the real crunch time of the market, and we've just found that it might not have been as fast as it was 6 months ago, but people are definitely still interested in buying, and if it's a good location and et cetera, they eventually come around to buying. Yeah. So,
and what would you say are the biggest risks right now in terms of in the development space, and how do you guys go about it to mitigate that risk?
Biggest risks are, I think, probably making sure that you can sell the units for what you're expecting, because obviously you base your whole decision-making process on what you think the revenue will be. So it's really about getting the location right, making sure that people are actually going to want to live there, really probably putting yourself in the mind of the people that are going to be buying the units. Like, is this a good location? Is there parks? Do I got access to public transport? Is there, et cetera? Is this close to where I'm likely to work? So I think sales are like, a big challenge at the moment. So that's front of mind. And then I think just making sure that you're doing really solid due diligence around, are the services going to work? Are the earthworks going to cost more than what we think? Is there any reason, is there, every piece of property that we look at, we've probably, we spend a lot of time going through all the details, making sure that like what we're trying to execute is going to be feasible and cost what we think it's going to cost, and that people are going to want to live there. So I don't know if the risks really change. It's probably just, there's that saying that time makes a lot of good developers. So a lot of people could kind of buy a soft deal, and then 9 months later when they go to market, it actually all works out because the market's gone up. But like, we're not buying any of these thinking, oh, the price that we think we can sell them for is going to go up. So they need to be good deals on the day that you decide to buy them.
I've got to say, some of the deals that you guys are putting out there, like the price is quite reasonable in the location that they are, so you guys are definitely buying well. But I think one of the question on a lot of people's mind, especially if they're trying to get in the space, or if it's just mom and dad investors, is like, well, even for me, like I'm thinking about, oh man, our construction costs are they going to continue to go up? That's one. The second one is like logistic. Like, are we going to be holding onto our property for unexpected long period because there's not enough material? Like, those are the major, like, some of the questions, especially if you're doing your numbers right now with construction per square meter. It's like, do you see construction costs continue to go up? Like, and is there much more room there for it to keep going?
I think as the demand drops off, which it has a little bit, the pressure on pricing will drop off. I don't expect the rates to go back massively. I think they might go back slightly, but I think when the demand drops off, some of those risks around timing and availability of labor will reside a little bit. So you probably got a little bit more time surety, and you probably could go into it with a little bit more confidence that it's not going to blow out massively. Probably if you sort of budgeted what people were saying it was costing back then, once you get through a bit of contingency, you might end up on that number. We're finding that trades are becoming a little bit more interested in looking for work, whereas 6 months ago everyone was like, oh, if you want me to do it, it's going to be 6 months and it's going to cost this much. Whereas now people are a little bit more saying, hey, what do you guys got coming up? You got any work? And obviously a lot of buildings in New Zealand, almost all of them, residential anyway, are built out of timber framing. And like at the beginning of the year, we were finding pre-nail lead times could be almost up to a year. Whereas now we're sort of finding, if we ring someone and we say, hey, we want like 4 months sort of thing, they're like, yeah, we can fit you in, no problem, sort of. So the demand's definitely dropped off. So that's definitely helped. The jib situation, I think it's still not fully resolved, but it's definitely getting better. That was a big risk to people getting jibbed for a while. We use a jib and a tenancy system, and we ended up getting it all when we needed it. But it was a lot of work on my part making sure that all came together for sure. Yeah.
So I got one question. If you were doing your own deals and you're doing your own numbers, and you don't have access to wholesale, price, so what are you gonna price your construction per square meter rate on when you do your numbers on the two-story terrace?
Are we talking sort of like an entry level type terrace?
Yeah, entry level. It's just like build and hold.
Yeah, I would have thought if you're gonna engage someone to build it, like go get a main contractor or like a builder that's going to do sort of all the management as well. I wouldn't be thinking you get much change at a, low to mid threes. Yeah. Which,
reasonable.
So, but I think if I was going to do a development and I knew I was going to need someone to build it, I would be spending a lot of time seeing what they've built, sort of getting feedback from them on like what sort of designs they can do affordably. Because there's a lot of small details in construction that can actually end up create a lot of hassle, particularly around roof lines and how the overall footprints of the buildings. A lot of architects don't, some of them do, but sometimes they don't appreciate little changes in details might actually make it a lot more challenging to build. So spend a lot of time trying to get feedback from those contractors, and working with your architect to really try and fine tune what it is that you're building, that you can do it affordably, or do it at least just do it for what you're wanting to spend. I think the best thing is if you're real upfront about, I think people have this idea that like, oh, I'll just see how much it's going to cost, I might save money. I think you're much better off to say, this is how much I want to spend, and then sort of get a good team and try and actually achieve that.
Right.
Whereas, I think a lot of times people go, oh, maybe I'll get it a bit cheaper, I won't say too much. But I think I would look at it more as like a bit of a team endeavor, and particularly because construction is a challenging endeavor. Get all the right people around, just be upfront about what you're trying to achieve, and then sort of work as a team to try and do it. Because ultimately, if you've got a deal and it works at a certain level, you just got to do what you can to do it at that level. If you do it cheaper, that's great. But, I think with all the challenges at the moment, you're better off to just try and set a benchmark and try and hit it, as opposed to,
That's really good advice.
Yeah.
So Crowe Consulting, if you guys want to reach out, Crowe Consulting, I take half the commission. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, my last question before we close off, I like to know what is your next goal now? Like, and what are the criterias? You know, what's your next goal, and how are you trying to get yourself there investment wise?
It's an interesting question, one I've been spending lots of time thinking about. And given that, like this, I would say maybe in my time in property, this is probably the like sort of the most, I guess, the slowest market. So that's quite interesting as well, because it's only been sort of 9 months of, I would say, in all the time that I've been in property, that's been sort of this flat, I would say. So it's kind of throws another interesting dynamic into the mix. But my goal, I would say, still obviously trying to build wealth, because whilst I got a young family and not in school, we're maybe slightly more agile. So yeah, probably looking at opportunities more around investment as opposed to like owner occupied type things. It might be that given that there might not be a huge amount of capital gain in the sort of next 18 to 2 years, I could be wrong, but that's just maybe my gut feel. We might sort of look to stay a bit more liquid over the next few years and invest in some deals more as just on a pure investment basis. And I think because there'll be there's definitely less buyers in that development space, I think that there's opportunities to buy well. So if you get the formula right, I think there's still good opportunities even in like a slightly quieter market. So yeah, at the moment I'm sort of trying to figure out what that next investment's going to be, and how that all come together. But I think that's probably my goal. Because eventually you obviously need to get to a bit of a, work on growing your wealth a little bit to maybe even get to the point where an investment's an option. Like, when you only got a small deposit, that the buying the house is a good option, because you've only got so much money, and putting it into a house is really safe. But probably got to the point where it can consider some investment options, and that's kind of what I'm thinking. Yeah.
Now, because you've got this bodybuilder background, so when you do bodybuilding, you think down to each of the calories that you're taking, and so you're quite detailed with your goals. So you gave us the overall view of your goal. I want to understand some of the numbers that you're aiming for. There must be some numbers you're throwing around.
Right. Like I would say that the real obvious markers in if you're looking at property development based investment, I think, are what's the margins and what's your return on your investment. And I would be saying, for me personally, probably being slightly more risk adverse, if you want a pretty strong deal, I'd be looking at 30% margins and probably like 100% return on investment, pre-tax. That's probably the benchmarks I'm looking at. But it's pretty hard. It is pretty hard to generate. So you do got to spend a lot of time looking, that's for sure. I literally look at property every single day. There's no day that goes by. Even I'm on holiday, I look at everything. So I'm always looking and thinking, what could you do here? What would people be interested in buying in this location? What are the positives? What are the negatives? Even if it's not a property that I'm personally going to pursue, I still think through all that. But that's just because it's a bit of a passion for me. I think one good learning for me since sort of going Titus, and even just seeing development happening in a tougher market, is a lot of those like trophy type developments in those top areas that are quite, they would be quite desirable from a development point of view to do something really cool. But they do, basically the more that you need to sell the unit for, obviously the smaller your buyer pool gets. So I was probably more thinking, oh man, I'd like to do something really cool. But now I realize that, hey, it doesn't take much, that those really top end developments do present quite a few challenges. But if you get the formula right, there's a lot of opportunity. But I think I've just having seen how, say, interest rates in 9 months have gone from 2.5% to 6%. That completely changes people's view on buying off plan or what they can afford. So it's been quite interesting for me. I probably maybe had grander scale plans initially, but now that I've sort of seen, 9 months of sales, thinking, oh, maybe it is actually better to do like sort of a product that really applies to a wide market. Yeah. So I think that's probably been a little bit of a mind shift for me.
Is there a secret? Is that a secret in terms of what suburbs you're looking for?
I think for me, proximity to the CBD is a huge factor in where you would buy. I think that land disproportionately gets cheaper in price as you move away from the city. And I guess what I'm saying is, I think if you buy a development that's like an hour out of town, relatively speaking, in my view, it should be a lot cheaper than, say, something 10 minutes from town. So I think there's a little bit of a disparity there. So I would always be looking for things that are closer to the airport, to the CBD. I think looking at schools is quite important, because ultimately the whole idea of buying properties is usually kind of, I guess, and this is maybe because I'm in that sort of stage of life, but based around what's there for your family to do there. How are my family going to feel there? So you want to get those areas that kind of offer those, positive opportunities to people moving into the area. I think. And I think there's a lot of value just to be, if you're looking at a property or thinking about an area, just spend a lot of time there. Go drive down the streets, see what kind of people are living in the area. I think just actually going out and having a look and talking to people, you can get a lot of knowledge from. Yeah.
Awesome,
Yeah.
man. Really appreciate it. I enjoyed that. Did you have anything else that you felt like I miss? You need to.
Not really. I
share?
mean, I'm definitely no expert, but like I got a brother at the moment. He's looking to buy a property. So we're always talking about, like, he says, "Oh, what do you think about this one?" And we'll go back and forth on lots of different properties. And I'd say probably the main two things that I mentioned to him that I think have served me well are probably, like, if you've looking at buying a property, really go through all the details on a real deep, on a real detailed level. If interest rates go to this much, how much is the repayments going to be? Can I afford that? Look at what other properties are selling for, and kind of, try and decide, is this actually a good deal? My plan is, if your plan is to hold it for 2 years, what do you actually think is going to happen over that 2-year period? What are the positives and the negatives to buying it? So really get down on each deal. And I think what I found actually is, even in my own, I guess, journey, is even if you find something that's not exactly what you're going to buy, if you go through that process on a real detailed level, you make quite a few realizations, and it might actually change your trajectory, or you might go, actually, that other property that I looked at would be much more suitable. And you might go, oh yeah, I'll go buy that one. So it takes a little bit of time and, effort, but I think there's a lot of benefit from that. And then finally, I always think, if you're going to buy something, make sure it's got a little bit of X factor, whether it's the location, or that you can add value, or it might be subdividable, or, it might be a dual key, but just try and find something that's got a few unique features, so that when that may, even if other people might not be seeing them when they come to buy the property, but you do, that gives you a little bit of an advantage. So I would say really think through all the details and focus on whatever the X factor is of that property, and I think that's probably what I've mainly done.
It's the resale value, right? It adds to your resale value.
Yeah, well, I mean, I suppose there'll be people who are looking to buy and, eventually build their wealth. So I think most first-home buyers are kind of, if they focus on that, it'll serve them well in the short to medium term. Yeah, because no one wants to buy something and lose money, do they? I mean,
yeah.
The Kiwi dream is kind of to build your wealth through property, So
definitely.
Yeah.
Really appreciate it, Scott. So I'm gonna stop the recording there.